Oh, so there's somebody more than me. Come on in.
I guess we should put it on.
I was working. You gotta hand all these up right here. Let me flip this item. Me too.
Not in any driveway, not on the street, not anything. And no cars on the street.
Good evening. I'd like to call the March 4th, 2019 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Wiseman?
Here.
Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee?
Here.
Mr. Erdl?
Here.
Mrs. Cameron?
Here.
Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is the approval of minutes. Everyone should have the minutes to the last meeting. Is there a motion or are there any changes that need to be offered? Okay, Ms. McCartney, yes. You can speak up into the microphone, please. Thank you.
On page 5, under Director's Reports, instead of Housing Court, it should say the Housing Center. That's my
Very good. Is there anything else? Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Erdl to accept the minutes of February 20, 2019, a second by Mrs. Cameron. Is there any discussion? This is as amended, so seeing none. Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Pass.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Yes.
Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes for a total allotted time of 15 minutes per meeting. The podium is over there. There is a microphone. If there's anybody who would care to address the city this evening, now would be the time. If you could step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be sure to speak into the microphone so that we can all hear you and you're properly recorded for.
I'm Bert Siebert, 2645 Witten Road. Mayor, I've received a copy of the Mosaic. I want to say it's the finest publication I've received in my over 70 years as a resident of University Heights.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was out of town when you did the State of the City address. I read the report of it, and I'm just awfully upset that we have a council of 7 people here that wasn't watching our pocketbook. Bills weren't paid in a year. Checkbook wasn't balanced. It really upset me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. C. And I don't always comment after comments, but I feel compelled to do so here, and I think in defense of this council. I know that this council sought and asked for requests of the previous administration, sought the information that we talked about, that I delivered at the State of the City, and they didn't get it. They asked for it repeatedly, and they were frustrated by the attempts to get that information, and they didn't get it. And I think one of the reasons why, and if I may speak for them, I think one of the reasons why they backed a change in the mayor's office in City Hall was because they weren't getting the answers. And I do believe this council met its responsibility to get the answers for the city on behalf of its residents by bringing in an administration that would look at these things coolly, dispassionately, and report back as to what was found. So it is frustrating that it took as long as it did. And it is frustrating that it took a change of administration to get to the answers. And I share that frustration. It's one of the reasons I ran. So I do not blame this council for that. Instead, I thank this council for having for standing up on behalf of the city to get the answers. And thank you with regard to the mosaic, because we're really happy with how that turned out. And Mr. Cook had so much to do with the success of that. So if you would wave. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the city? Mrs. Stewart.
Sherry again. Okay, tonight's topic is vehicles. Last meeting's topic was trash. And I discovered something since our last meeting, that 90% of the nuisance properties that have trash problems also have vehicle problems. Gee, what a surprise. I told James there's a house on the corner of Warrensville Center and Meadowbrook. Lots of problems with their trash. On Saturday, they had their trash on the tree lawn. Again, this was the second weekend in a row, and containers turned over, bags every which way, and eight vehicles in the driveway. A friend pointed that out to me, and I thought maybe it was a one-time thing. I went by a few days later, got to stop at the light, counted 8 cars. Now, I don't know if we don't have, if we have ordinances and they're not being enforced, or if we don't have them. But that is beyond ridiculous. There has to be a limit on the number of cars that can be any place besides an apartment. Because this happens all over the city. You can pick out the slum landlords' properties in a heartbeat. They got cars parked up and down the driveway. They got trash every which way but loose. And in my opinion, you have 2 garages, 2 cars, 2 in the driveway. That's it. Now, there can be exceptions to everything. But as a few people have pointed out, these houses were not meant for 6, 8, 10 cars. Most of these are single-family homes, not the, not the 2-family ones. And if there is exceptions, they need to be real specific. And there seems to be no reason why there can't be some place. Now, when this facility is no longer being used, there's a parking lot over there that the school uses, and I think the city should think about purchasing, at least whatever, and get all these slum landlords to pay for extra parking for anything over 4 vehicles. Across the street from me, there's 2 garages and a slab, and they use none of them. They park all the way down and over the sidewalk. I was going to say to the sidewalk. I brought this up to Chief Rogers, and he quoted an ordinance. The grass cutter, because they're not landscapers, for the apartment have a huge truck and an even bigger trailer. They park it right next to the apartment in the no parking zone at the narrowest part of the street, it causes traffic jams. So if there's an ordinance, the ordinance needs to be amended that, you know, if the street isn't wide enough, which this is the narrowest part of the street, it gets wider when it gets to my house. The apartment has 8 garages and 12 cars. Somebody, and I think it might have been Mike, got rid of 3 of them a few months ago. Well, I think they're back again. And since the students are on spring break now, any of the street cars on the street are not going to be John Carroll students. They're going to be coming from the apartment. And on any given day, you can see 2 to 6 cars from my house to Traymore all day long. This morning at 7 o'clock, there was a car with a Pennsylvania license. It was there when I left to come here. It'll be there when I get home, and it'll be there when I go to sleep tonight. Streets are not parking lots. Driveways are not used car lots. And that's what this suburb is turning into. And if we don't do something about it, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. The at the 4017 last Thursday, I called dispatch. They were having a party. The whole street was blocked up, and there was a truck over the sidewalk, and the truck in front of it's not supposed to be there because it's a commercial truck. And I've told Chief Rogers this, so I'm not saying anything behind his back. His officers are way too nice. They are not ticketing, citing, whatever, these violators. The officer came quickly, and the next time I looked out, the 2 trucks are pulling in the driveway and the officer's pulling away. There was no way there would have been time to give a ticket. And that other truck should not have been there, because according to Chief Rogers, they cited him last fall. So if his truck was parked where it shouldn't have been, he should have been given a ticket. And the problem now is he's another one with this huge trailer that takes up the whole driveway. So if somebody doesn't do something about him now, come April or May, he's going to be parked in the driveway again. And at least 3 or 4 times he's parked on the street on the wrong side, in front of the neighbor's house, the driveway where he lives, and his house, so he can just stop in. The people at 4013 and 4017 and at the apartment all think they're entitled. They're just renters, and they need to be reined in. And the problem with the trash and the vehicles, it needs to be taken care of yesterday. Because come August, it's going to start all over again with a new batch of John Carroll people. And I don't know if anybody's ever had this idea, but I think it's a great one. Somebody needs to sit down with somebody at John Carroll and let them know, because they enroll more students than they can accommodate. They dump the excess on our city and turn our city into a slum. And somebody told me that the dorms aren't full. Well, that needs to be definitely addressed. Those dorms need to be full to capacity before they start dumping all these kids on our neighborhood. And I also think that they should take, I don't know what the exact word is, they should be more involved in this situation. These off-campus kids should have to attend a town hall meeting before school starts in August. If they don't, they can't come to class. And what about letting John Carroll handle the problems? If I have a problem, I call or email somebody at the city and let that person email or call somebody at John Carroll and let them
30 seconds.
And let them rein these kids in. Because like I said, this is going to start all over again in August. I've been coming to these meetings since last June, and very, very little has changed. And there are parts of the city that look like a dump. And just like I told you last time, drive down Washington, South Belvoir, Bushnell, Monday, Tuesday morning, and you'll see trash every which way but loose.
Thank you, Mrs. Stewart. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening?
My name is Kate Euler. I've lived in the city since '64. I live on Fenwick Road. I've been here a few times. I'm terribly confused after the State of the City address was, I read it in the Sun newspapers. Wednesday is choir night. I go to choir on Wednesday. The records that I requested in September revealed, the financial records revealed a $2+ million surplus. And I know those records were audited by a state auditor, and we didn't have Basil Russo doing it. So that has to be a legitimate figure, $2+ million surplus in the city's coffers. Then, regarding all the bills that weren't paid and the incompetent financial management, I don't think that was the word that was used, but it was my understanding that council, every member of council, was aware of the finances every month.
They weren't.
Well, they were aware of the finances more frequently than to allow a lot of bills not to be paid. And there were people on this council who were on Mayor Infeld's council and on Mayor Rothschild's council. So they know the finances of the cities, and I don't believe the council would have permitted bills not to be paid, the city not paying its bills, quote unquote. And aren't they supposed to help the mayor with all these problems? Don't we elect the council people and pay the council people to assist the mayor in running a city of 14,000 people? So my confusion is significant. And I still don't have the financial report. I don't have the monies that I filed a FOIA request in January to ask how much money was spent by the city in 2018 and how much cash how much cash is in the city coffers now. How much did it cost the city to run in 2018? And where are the tax credits that were promised by campaigners? And where is my refund from my FOIA request? I was charged 25 cents per page. But when the Ohio Department of Commerce guidelines state that the appropriate cost of the page for a FOIA request is 5 cents. So I was way overcharged. I told them that, and I'm waiting. I was told, well, the finance department will be back in January. Well, it's March. I'm waiting for my refund. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hewlett. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? Very good. This takes us up then to reports and communications from the mayor and taking of action. I will dispense with a formal report this evening and simply state that this evening we will be introducing on first reading the city budget. It is a compromise document. It is not everything that everyone here in the city would want to do, but it is, it does embody things that need to be done, things that have to be done, things that are certainly the collective vision of this administration and of members of council. And there were some tough choices that we had to make to put this budget together, but at the same time was done with a view towards the future and towards a view of growing and reinvesting in our city. And this administration is committed to doing that. So I will that for this evening and provide a lengthier report next time. So without further ado, we will move to the agenda items. The first agenda item is Resolution 2019-08, rededicating Community Park as Walter Stinson Community Park. Now, I'd like to speak briefly on this. At the State of the City, I made an announcement of the administration's intention to rename the community park Walter Stinson Community Park, which is something that we could do administratively, but at the same time, after consultation with our vice mayor, who serves essentially as the president of our council, we thought that it would be fitting to make this a group announcement formalizing this rededication of the park. So we've prepared a resolution which I'd like to read now. Whereas Walter Stinson has served the city of University Heights, Ohio for 43 years since his appointment as community coordinator on August 2nd, 1976 by then Mayor Irving Konigsberg. And whereas during the course of his distinguished career, Walter Stinson has represented the city of University Heights on several boards, such as the Heights-Hillcrest Regional Chamber of Commerce, the First Suburbs Development Council, the former Transportation Consortium Coordinating Committee, and the Senior Transportation Connection, and he currently serves the city as the manager of senior services. And whereas Walter Stinson has served the community well in many capacities under 4 mayors, and was instrumental in promoting diversity and fair housing opportunities by serving on the former Hillcrest Housing Cuyahoga Plan, participating on the series of discoveries, and by applying to the Cuyahoga County Department of Development for Community Development Block Grant Program funds to assist low and moderate income individuals through various projects. And whereas Walter Stinson has been an influence for good in the growth and progress of our community while furthering the cause of better understanding and making a difference in the lives of many, which has earned him the respect of a host of residents representing all ages and walks of life. Now, therefore, be it jointly proclaimed by the mayor and resolved by the council of the city of University Heights, Ohio, that Section 1, the community park, located at 2313 Fenwick Road, is hereby rededicated as Walter Stinson Community Park to commemorate the exemplary and inspirational service of the only individual to have served this community under the last 4 mayors and dozens of city council members, and so that generations hence may know the value our community places on public service. Section 2, the mayor and council of the city of University Heights, on behalf of its employees and all of its citizens, do hereby express sincere appreciation to Walter Stinson for his many years of dedicated service and contributions to the community. Section 3, there shall be prepared duplicate originals of this resolution. One such copy shall be delivered to Walter Stinson as a token of appreciation. The duplicate original copy shall be maintained in the permanent records of the city of University Heights as a lasting tribute. And Section 4, this resolution shall take effect at the earliest time allowed by law. So this is the... Thank you. And I know that is really meant for Mr. Stinson, whose service to the community is simply unmatched, unparalleled by anyone. So, at least here in the city of University Heights. So, is there any discussion, or is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Earl.
Yes. So.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Earl. Second. Second by Mr. Rock. Is there any discussion? Well, if there is none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Erdl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Motion, resolution carries and is adopted. The next item on the agenda is ordinance 2019-09, and enacting codified ordinance chapter 874 entitled Cigarette and Tobacco Vendors Sales to Persons Under 21. Enacted codified ordinance section 614 entitled Tobacco Products, and amending codified ordinance chapter 1650 entitled Smoking in Public Places. This is on first reading and is being introduced by Councilwoman Michelle Weiss. Councilwoman Weiss, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So this ordinance effectively raises the age limit for sale of nicotine to 21. There's actually some startling statistics, especially with the recent increase in vaping products that are sold with flavors and directed to a lot of young adults and teenagers. And the ordinance actually states a few statistics, which I think are relevant, that I just want to say over very quickly. There's 330 communities in 6 states that have enacted tobacco 21 policies, which are 25% of the nation's population. The other relevant statistic that I just want to say is data from the Cuyahoga County Youth Risk Behavior Survey in 2017 indicates that over 35% of students in Cuyahoga County reported having used an electronic vapor product, and over 15% of students in Cuyahoga County reported current use of electronic vapor products. So I think this is an important health deterrent, or health, actually this ordinance will advocate for healthier behaviors for teenagers and young adults, and I think it's important for the city to enact this, and I want to thank the law director for helping in the drafting of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Mr. McConville, is there anything you'd care to add with respect to the proposed ordinance?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to walk through a few of the nuts and bolts for council members. There are actually 3 separate chapters of the codified ordinances.
Could you speak up a little bit? I know some people are thank you.
Apologize for that. Is that better?
Yes.
There are 3 separate chapters of the codified ordinances that are impacted by this ordinance. First is 874, which we're creating. This is really the most of the meat on the bone here. We are enacting a very broad definition of the term tobacco product to include all of the new types of vapor and juuling products that seem to be so pervasive among young adults and teens. We prohibit the sale of those tobacco products to anyone under 21. We require vendors of tobacco products to walk through a permitting process that will be issued through the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. And we have enacted criteria for the suspension or the revocation of those permits if the vendors are violating the ordinance and selling to persons under 21, and also instituting a set of penalties, monetary penalties, for the very same violations that increase depending on the number of times the ordinance is violated. In addition to that, we are enacting a new a new chapter of the codified ordinances that makes it a first-degree misdemeanor either to sell to persons under 21 or to provide or present fake identification. And in that sense, this ordinance tracks the same prohibition that we have on the use of alcohol or sale of alcohol to persons under 21. And then finally, we revise, give me a moment here, Chapter 1650 of our codified ordinances, which essentially is an old anti-smoking ordinance that was enacted back in the 80s and is pretty anachronistic when compared to the workplace smoking law that was enacted statewide in 2006. So I've tried to keep that ordinance intact to the extent possible, but There are various sections that are just coming out wholesale. For example, sections regulating smoking sections in restaurants and places that no longer are legal under Ohio law. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions that council members may have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Does anybody have any questions or would like to make any comments? Mrs. Hardy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly, this is a growing problem from everything we've heard in the news. As much as tobacco use in youth has decreased or had decreased over years of work on this issue, vaping has brought it all back. So I want to thank Mrs. Weiss for bringing this forward and working on this, because this is so important. It's important for the health of our children. We have a lot of youth in University Heights, so I really appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Does anybody else want to comment or have any questions for either the sponsor or the moderator?
I do have a question, Mayor.
Okay, Mr.
And
Sims.
I just want to piggyback on the comment that my colleague just made relative to how important legislation like this is in today's time, when the whole idea of what tobacco products are has been redefined by the vaping products. As a matter of fact, I had some family members over, and my nephew had a little vapor thing. He's 40, but he had one, and I was like, "What is this?" He doesn't even smoke, which he does now. So I was a little disappointed, and I expressed my disappointment.
Mr. Sims, could you speak in the microphone?
Yes, these mics are a little different.
Yeah, they're a little lower. Yeah, they're a little lower. Yes.
The school board's much shorter than we are.
Well, but so my colleague Michelle Weiss is to be commended for her swift attention to this matter, and I think it will make an important difference at University Heights because it's an issue. But my question is on Exhibit B, Chapter 614. I'm a little confused as to what Section 614.03 is getting into. Part A is pretty clear. So I think Part A is saying that anybody who furnishes false ID will be in trouble. I don't understand exactly what Part B is saying.
So I think Part A would be regulating the furnishing, regulating the creation of false IDs for distribution. And then Part B would be regulating the use of false ID.
Okay, so anyone who manufactures
so
one.
to create one is a criminal offense.
And
First degree needs to be.
And the use one. Okay. All right. And I'm definitely against it, but I just think that the penalty associated with 1614 is a lot stiffer than the penalty, as I read it, that is listed in the new section to the code. And I just think that everybody should be subject to comparable penalties in these situations. And what I'm referring to is the Section 874.08, Section C, and maybe I'm misreading it, but it just seems like, I guess this is the person that is actually selling the product is given a lot of opportunities at a much lower cost within a 5-year period. So I don't understand.
So what we're doing is we're creating a set of civil penalties as well as a set of criminal penalties. So the person, the person who actually makes the sale might be different from the person who owns the store. So the civil penalty would be a civil penalty for the owner, but it's the employee who's violating knowingly. The ordinance would be subjected to the criminal penalty. This was a topic of a lot of debate at committee as to whether to institute a criminal piece to this, and again, it's a first-degree misdemeanor. But that would be the distinction.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Mr. McConville. The section that Mr. Sims brought up about the furnishing, do you think that would also apply to a family member who is older and has a similar appearance, perhaps giving to a younger sibling an ID that makes them appear to be of age, but really it's big sister giving to little sister an ID?
I think it would encompass that, yes.
Right, good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments with regard to the proposed ordinance? Very good. Well, then, if there is nothing further, we will consider the first reading to have been had. Very good. The next item, before I read it, let's see, do we need a motion to amend the agenda? We kind of went back and forth.
So my understanding, I guess the finance director can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the intention was to remove item C from the agenda, and then to modify the title of item D, and then provide an explanation to council as to why we're doing that.
Correct. Right, I believe item D would be then ordinance 2019-11. We would still be using 11.
Yes, I believe we're still using 11. I believe the clerk of council wanted to not reuse any of the numbers.
So ordinance 2019-11 authorizing, instead of temporary, permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures of the City of University Heights, Ohio, for a period commencing January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019 on first reading, with the understanding that the city budget for 2019, rather than being a separate item on the agenda, is actually an exhibit to the ordinance, proposed ordinance 2019-11.
Correct.
All right. Then I think we would dispense with item C and proceed with item D as restated here. Ordinance 2019-11 authorizing permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures of the City of University Heights, Ohio, for the period commencing January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019 on first reading.
Well, the only thing is right.
Okay.
We need to do all that by motion.
Very good.
And the reason for this is that what we have done in the past and what would typically be the case is that you would pass a permanent appropriations ordinance as your budget with your budget attached to it. So we simply don't need two different ordinances. I think it would be confusing to the auditor coming back to see us do it that way.
And it would also be historically consistent with past practice. Just consistent with past practice. Okay.
Mayor, sorry.
Very good. Yes.
Would we be then skipping 2019-10?
Yes, the idea would be that we would dispense with 2019-10, simply go directly to 2019-11 as amended, and the budget itself with, the full budget with the lines, line by line, would be an exhibit to.
So there will be no ordinance 2019-10?
Correct.
At all?
And
that's okay to skip one?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
if we remove it from the agenda by motion.
Okay.
So should we do two separate motions, or can there be? Okay, so I would first ask for a. Oh, Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item D only includes appropriations up through March 31st.
Right, that's why I was saying we would be amending that when by motion to take out the word temporary, make it permanent, take out the word March, make it December.
When you look at this, these are the permanent appropriations. That's why I was surprised when I read it originally, because that's what it looked like.
Yes, and they are the permanent.
They're the permanent appropriations. It's just misleading.
Yes, that's it. Very good. All right. So the first motion I would entertain would be a motion to agenda to remove ordinance 2019-10, item C of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Sims, second by Mrs. Cameron. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Earl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron?
Aye.
Mrs. Lodge?
Aye.
Okay, so the agenda is so amended. The next motion I would entertain would be a motion to amend item D to state ordinance 2019-11 authorizing permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures of the City of University Heights, Ohio for the period commencing January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019 on first reading. Is there a motion to amend the agenda accordingly?
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Rock, second by Mr. Sims. If there is no discussion, Mrs. Thomas, please call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Wiseman?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Earl?
Aye.
Mrs. Cameron? Aye. Mrs. Lodge?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, and the agenda is so amended. We are now on item D, ordinance 2019-11, authorizing permanent appropriations for current and other expenditures of the City of University Heights, Ohio for the period commencing January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019 on first reading. Mr. Goff, as Finance Director, you have the floor.
This is the appropriations ordinance that follows up with our process over the last several weeks with both meetings of the Finance Committee with the Finance Advisory Group, as well as at least one, might have been two if I'm mistaken, might be mistaken how many committees of the whole we also had of council, a couple of them in there as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for their hard work in crafting a budget that, while not perfect for a lot of different reasons, is one that everybody can agree on is what we need going forward for this year. In preparing that, we also have, and I'd like to thank Mike Cook for putting it up on our website. We have the detailed budget, all 200 plus pages of it. That details the information both on a fund basis, looking at fund by fund, as we've looked at some of the spreadsheets over the last couple of weeks, giving you a review of that, as well as a look at both a summary and a detail of each department. Depending upon what information you're looking for, there's usually the answers to your question about the budget in terms of detail and comparison to some of the prior year items are in there. What else do I have for notes for you at the moment? I think that pretty much sums it up unless there's specific questions regarding the budget. You're definitely going to see this again for the second reading at the next meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Goff. Are there any questions for Mr. Goff or questions or comments anyone would like to make at this time? Mrs. Purdy, you have the floor.
Mayor, I want to thank Mr. Goff for all the hard work. He has been exemplary in providing us transparently with a significant amount of data. I can't speak to this budget because it is so weighty that we just got it today, the final version, and I was not able to attend the last Finance Committee meeting because I was out of town with family. But in the meetings prior to that I did attend, he provided in-depth information and answered all questions extensively. This is the first time council has received this kind of information, which we cannot compel a mayor or his administration to provide, but which was provided transparently and collaboratively to this council. Now, what usually happens is the Finance Committee makes a recommendation. I was not there. There are three people on the committee, Mr. Sims, Mrs. Weiss, and Mr. Rock. I understand there is a recommendation, so I would invite one of them to go ahead and discuss the last meeting and the recommendation to council about the budget.
Well, I can make some comments since I chaired the meeting, but I just think that the last meeting was a continuation of the hard work that council has put in order to try to prioritize what we could do with the limited amount of resources that we have available to the city. I think there's been several references to the budget not being perfect. I don't understand those references. I think that to the extent that we were able to go through and take a hard look at our priorities and again the limited resources that are available to the city. We made a decision about what we could afford and what we couldn't afford. And I think the one thing that probably was most highlighted at the last meeting is the idea that we as a city need to make sure that we're trying to look at opportunities for revenue enhancements, because the one thing that is happening in our community, because we don't have a commercial base, we barely have a retail base, and so the only two major sources of income that we have are property and income taxes, and they are not expanding or growing at the rate that our expenses are, and the expenses of the world are outside of the control of anyone on this council. I would also like to thank Mr. Goff for his work, and not just his work on the budget, but the work that he did to bring us to a point where we could even look at a budget, because we did receive an audit, but that audit had to be delayed until we could hire extra staff and extra resources to pull together financial information that was certainly not related to the good work of a good finance department. And so, there was a lot of preliminary work that had to be done, cleanup work that had to be done, in order to reach a point where it was even possible to understand what the financial condition of the city was. And when we did find out what it was, I think based on that knowledge, we have made some decisions about what we can do in 2019 compared to what we did in 2018 and what we've done in other past years. And to a large extent, we've tried to address the issues and the areas that are most important to any community, and that's service and public safety. To the extent that we have been able to look at some opportunities to increase capital improvements, we've done that. We have had an opportunity in recent years to have a fairly robust road improvement program. It may not be it is not as robust as it has been recommended for 2019. So I think, to some of the comments about whether the budget is perfect or not, I think that is the best possible budget that we could work with given the limited resources and the continuing increases in expenses that we have found, and the total disarray of some of the financial information that we learned existed, to the extent that we had bank reconciliations that had not even been prepared for an entire year. So, it was a lot of frustration. Mr. Goff came in, he did a good job of, really putting his nose to the grindstone, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense to anyone. So, thank you, you are commended. And those would be my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
The Finance Committee did recommend that the full council approve the budget.
That's how it got on the agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
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 So it'll be on the agenda. It's good to know that.
Very good. Mr. Rock.
Mayor, I'd like to add to that. I think I might have been the one that made the recommendation or made the motion to recommend to council, or a second, I can't remember. But this was a very collaborative process amongst our council administration and advisory committee of citizens. And I too have to commend Mr. Goff, who took my phone calls and worked with me in the committees, and we just never stopped. And this was not version 1, 2, or 3. This has been reiterated so many times, so that it is a compromise amongst our council and our constituents. I heard it's not perfect. To me, I think that this is a very good budget. It's very responsible. It's a very conservative budget. There were some tough choices we did have to make, and that sort of is reflected here in the budget. I want to go back a couple years, because this budget, there's a tab on here that talks about revenue versus expenses, and this is the one tab that I kind of turn to every time to see our financial picture. And we are ending the year 2018 with a surplus of $509,964, which is tremendous news. You know, we are in the black for 2018. And the mayor had noted in the State of the City address that while there weren't lavish surpluses in the past, this document certainly does tell that story. Where 2 years ago there wasn't a surplus, there was an $841,913 deficit for the year 2016. And in the following year there was a surplus of $1 million. So it wasn't the lavish surpluses that we were being told, and I think that's why the council had kept asking. In committee meeting, council the whole meetings for more information that we weren't getting. It was often we weren't getting our investment statements that we kept asking for. We have records of that. We have video or audio tapes of those requests. So I'm glad that the information is being provided now, and I really wholeheartedly appreciate that. The budgeting process that we went through this year was, again, very collaborative. It wasn't necessarily a wish list. These are the necessities to run the government of the city. And we had to budget this conservatively, worst case scenarios along the way. It's extremely accurate, but it's also extremely conservative in that we're making sure that the money is there in case this happens or that happens. So, and that is how we budgeted last year, as you may remember. Something had come up in a public comment about credits, and those were discussed in previous finance meetings. It's always been, at least my opinion, that if we have these lavish surpluses of $2 million, $2.5 million year after year, that's what we've been told, that we should give some money back. Or that is your tax dollars, we should be putting that to work. That's always just been my opinion, and it was always my opinion that that should be looked at on a year-by-year basis. This isn't a permanent credit. It's never meant to be a permanent credit. This is something that we should review on a year-by-year basis. So, you know, that's still my opinion. That's still how I want to, you know, pursue this. And I'd love to do a credit. I really do. I really would love to in the future do a credit. But again, on a year-by-year basis, that is something we have to look at. So it's why it hasn't been further developed, given the situation that we're currently in. So, but that's my opinion on the budget. I'm satisfied where it's at, and I was one to have approved the motion to bring it to council today.
Thank you, Mr. Rauch. Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to commend Mr. Goff. As my colleague said, this was an iterative process that took many, many weeks to finalize. One issue that I just wanted to touch on was one of the reasons that I think the residents were told they had a surplus was because all of the operating expenses were not included in the budget ever. A big example, our road, is the road construction. Road construction or road improvements are operating expenses. They're not you know, after the fact kind of things. You must keep up your roads, you must keep up your infrastructure, and those were never ever put into the budget after multiple requests of asking to be put in the budget. And I feel this was a very collaborative process. All of the council members that attended those meetings had input, as well as our fantastic financial advisory committee, our finance advisory committee, and I also feel that this is a true depiction of our budget and conservative as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Does anybody have anything further they'd like to say at this point?
I would like to thank Councilman Weiss, Sims, and Rock for restating in probably more eloquent words than I used a couple minutes ago how collaborative this was, the fact that it were hard choices involved, and I definitely think this is a better budget than what we just came if it had just simply been an administration's proposal without having the collaboration with council, and look forward to working on a longer-term kind of strategic 5-year plan later in the year that'll help make the process smoother going into future years.
Well, thank you, Mr. Goff. I was going to slip in there with the 5-year plan if you didn't. So.
Sorry to steal your thunder.
Not at all. Not at all. It's not like I'm going to be the one. You're going to be the one. So it's your thunder. I would have been stealing if I jumped in with it. But I too would like to thank you, James. Thank you, Mr. Goff, for all of your work on this. And with that, I would by name thank Rita Drew and Denise Mallet of our finance department also for their contributions not only to this but to pulling for doing so much within the department while you were so focused on this, because there was so much to do here. The overall condition of the records and what you found when you got here. We hear the word deplorable a lot, and you hear it so much that you don't. You need a word that's more deplorable than deplorable when you find something that's truly deplorable. But they were, and at times incomplete, and you know the auditors somehow were able to give us a relatively clean audit, all things considered. I think they were kind, given what we were able to give them. But I too would like to thank our Vice Mayor Susan Pardee and all the members of Council for the committee, all the members of the Finance Committee, and certainly everyone, all the citizens on the Finance Advisory Committee, concerned citizens with specialized knowledge and expertise in finance, who made a lot of very keen observations that I think were invaluable to this process, and adjustments made accordingly. And to go on with the 5-year plan, cities are not required to make a 5-year plan, but it seems like an incredibly good practice to do that. We've observed what our school board has been able to project using a 5-year plan, and given the reliability of past data and given our efforts to make to collect clean data and create clean data going forward and record good data going forward is really what I mean. Coming up with a 5-year plan and then being able to make sensible decisions with regard to revenue, with regard to credits, with regard to all those things. I mean, 2 years ago when I was talking about needing to adjust the tax credit and provide more tax credits, I was taking at face value that there was a $2.5 million surplus. As a resident who felt like our tax bills were very high, I found it offensive that there was $2.5 million being collected that wasn't being spent on us, because if we didn't actually need that money, then why is it still there? Why isn't it back to us? And the answer is it wasn't as simple as that. We saw the numbers, and the $2.5 million was inflated. And I think that for some folks, the idea of having a large credit was an indication that somehow that we're doing a good job here. And when really the ideal is that you take in what you need to spend, and you don't take in more than that. And you spend what you do take in, and you take in what you need to deliver the services this community demands. And this community does demand high services, and we deliver those services, and we do it faithfully, and we do it routinely. And I challenge any community to say that they deliver better services than we do to our residents, because everybody at City Hall works very hard to give the residents everything that they have coming in the form of services. I know that in this particular budget, the amount for wages is higher than ever. And I know that for some, that is taken as an indication that I'm on some kind of hiring spree, which is rather far from the truth. The thing is that wages, of course, are going to be up every year, because wages for any individual employee go up every year. This administration inherited the police unions had entered into a collective bargaining agreement with the city with 2.5% raises a year for 3 years, and those I'm not complaining about that at all. The police department deserved them, the fire department when they got them deserved them, the service department when they got them deserved them, and our non-bargaining employees who got the same raises as well also deserved them. Those raises are actually rather modest, but in the aggregate, those do cost. I know that there have been questions about hiring certain additional personnel. I can tell you that if you look at the numbers and actually do a dive into them, you take somebody like our economic development director, who is doing an invaluable service in this city every day in a way that nobody else could or did before. And for everything that we get in return for what she is doing, she costs the city less in compensation and benefits than a rookie firefighter does. And that's not to say that we don't need rookie firefighters. Of course we do. And we have some, and we're going to have more. But at the same time, the additional people that we have brought in to do things that this city needs to grow our tax base, to grow our business community, to do some of the things that Beechwood has done very well, that South Euclid has done very well, that Shaker has done very well, that we needed to step up to the plate to do the kinds of things that need to be done to compete as a city and to grow as a city and to be sustainable. And that is the kind of investment that is needed here. And I know that somebody is going, that there will be those that will say that's a waste of money. It's extremely short-sighted to say that. And our economic development director is doing a fantastic job and will continue to pay dividends into the future. So, I stand by that hire. I'm proud of that hire, and I am proud of similar hires in the administration who are also bringing new life to this city and doing things to showcase this city, to demonstrate to everyone why University Heights is so much more than home. So, that all said, if there's anything anybody else would like to add with regard to this budget, I'd be delighted to call on them at this point. Otherwise, we won't be voting on this tonight, of course. This is just the first reading, and we will be back in 2 weeks for this next reading. So, anything further from anyone? Okay. If not, then we will consider the first reading to have been done, and this will be back on the agenda for the next meeting in 2 weeks. Next item on the agenda is a motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. And I have nothing for which I need to ask for an executive session for. I don't know if anybody on council has something, and if you do, then move now, and or hold your peace till next time. So, if there is nothing, then we can dispense with that agenda item and go into the director's reports. Finance. Mr. Go.
Very glad to be, today was my first day back in the office on a daily basis. Mobility is finally getting there. Unfortunately, I'm over at the annex rather than City Hall itself, but we'll be able to do stairs eventually here at some point soon. In the meantime, though, I'd like to definitely thank Rita Drew and Denise Ballant, my staff, for the tremendous job they've done while I've been only telecommuting for the last several months, and they've been able to do a very good job dealing with a lot of the items that need a physical presence. With the return and the budget being out of the way, thank goodness, I'm able to get to where we're finalizing the rollout of our new accounting system. We're still on track for payroll to go live, the first pay in April. We have been at that pace for a couple of months now. The streamlined of the non-payroll approval process, hopefully by the end of the week we will have the mayor's approval of invoices being done electronically, and the intention is by the end of next week to be able to have purchase orders being requested electronically from the departments instead of coming into us in paper format. With that issue being one that we'll be able to resolve here rather quickly, and the budget out of the way, we're also able to start digging back into closing out 2018. 2018 has not been closed out yet. The interim financial reports for 2018 would be the revenue and expense reports that are attached to the interim bank reconciliation for December of 2018 that council members have received. We had a variance on there on the bank reconciliation that is part of still trying to resolve the bank reconciliations going back to prior by hiring. We're working to identify which transactions didn't get posted. In a couple cases, we think there might be a couple that might have been posted twice, and that's a matter of trying to resolve those so that we can close out 2018, hopefully before the end of March, and be able to move on to our gap conversion. We should be making the deadline of 150 days after year-end for our gap financial reports, which would be the end of May. At the moment, I see no reason we won't be able to make that. And we have the auditors, we're trying to schedule to come on in and have a call out to them, and hopefully they'll be coming in April is what I'd hope to have them, but they'll be able to come in and start looking at the cash part of our financial reporting. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those at this time.
Are there any questions for Mr. Goff? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Goff. Next report, Director of Law, Luke McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to report to council on a couple of meetings that I attended last week. First, the mayor, Councilman Weissman, and I attended a meeting with representatives from the Housing Center, Chris Canary and Carrie Pleasance, to discuss the particulars of our fair housing ordinance. And as a result of that discussion, council should anticipate legislation amending our fair housing ordinance to include an updated definition of the term source of income, where we specifically lay out all of the kinds of sources of income with respect to which we intend to prevent discrimination. And in particular, our goal is to put landlords on notice and make it clear in the language of the ordinance that landlords cannot discriminate against prospective tenants because a tenant has a voucher or some other type of governmental subsidy. In addition to that, we discussed stretching or elongating the time periods with respect to which all of the parties that would be involved in a fair housing complaint have to respond to the various statements, position statements that they're required to file under our ordinance. So that was a very productive meeting, and we should have legislation to you by the beginning of April, which happens to be Fair Housing Month. So the timing is also serendipitous. Secondly, I wanted to let you know that the CIC board met last week. We had a spirited discussion regarding the form of our minutes, the code of regulations, the conflict of interest policy. Those documents are being finalized for the board, and we began some cursory discussions on potential projects that the board hopes to consider in the near future. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. Any questions for Mr. McConville? Very good. Next is public safety. Chief Rogers is out of the city on city-related business, so there will be no report from him this evening. He will report next time. But Chief Perko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I just wanted to report briefly on our Fire Prevention Bureau. We've been open for 2 months now since it was reopened, and the executive captain and myself took the month of February to really research our ordinances, different permits and fee schedules, and we met with the administration last week to discuss a lot of those items. We want to work on strengthening our coordination with the building and housing department and economic coordinator. We want to create a workflow so that we can work with our businesses and have all the departments all on the same page with that. We're also coordinating with our legal counsel for best practices for enforcement updating all of our city ordinances. We want to kind of get caught up with the current fire codes and our neighboring communities in regard to ordinances and fire safety permits. The Fire Prevention Bureau hosted a regional meet and greet of our neighboring community inspectors and got to introduce everybody to each other and kind of see what the other inspectors in this area are doing so that we can kind of get ourselves caught up to speed. As I indicated, we're also reviewing our fee schedule and fines for things like tampering with fire safety systems and our internal policies and procedures. Overall, our goal is to strengthen the Bureau and provide some consistency and deliver the message that we're serious about prevention and risk reduction. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this more in an upcoming safety committee meeting. Also wanted to provide to you tonight a final draft of our 2018 annual report. I can pass this around and we'll probably have print copies at the next meeting or the first one in April.
Okay, thank you, Chief Perka. Next is service. Jeff McCordy. Mr. McCordy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. The City Service Department will be hosting household hazardous waste collection and paper shredding this weekend. So items may be dropped off on Friday the 8th or Saturday the 9th. The shredding truck will be on site at the Service Department on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So bring us your household hazardous waste and recycling items. We'll take care of that for you. Our tree program being performed by Parks Tree Service in the southwest quadrant of the city is approximately 75% done. We've received an invoice and approved that for 50% of the project so far. Hopefully they will be done sometime in the next 2 weeks. Advanced sewer cleaning is starting catch basin cleaning already in the northwest quadrant of the city. We'll be doing Washington, Raymond, Cedar, Barrington, Cranston, that area down to Silsby, and the eastern boundary will be Edgerton. They will start, they've already started, they've already done Washington and Raymond. They'll continue southward until we've got that portion done. And as soon as weather breaks, they will start the sewer cleaning and televising part of the program.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. McCordy? Yes, Mrs. Cameron.
Mr. McCordy, how's the street repairs for water main?
We currently have about 14 holes in the street that we have not been able to permanently repair yet from water main breaks that the Cleveland Water Department has dug up. We've temporarily patched them, but we have to come back, saw cut them out, fill them with concrete, and then top them with asphalt for most of them.
And out of 58, that's all you got left?
Out of...
I thought you said.
Could you speak into the microphone that says how many you have? Thank you.
Oh, hello. Okay, I wondered, based on what I recall you saying at one point, that you said we had about 58
That
spots.
was a number for last year. We had 38 water repairs last year.
Okay.
And as of fall going into winter, we had all of those repairs completed, meaning the road was patched and back to full service.
All right.
And since that time, we've created another 14 holes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are you able to share anything right now about the intersection of Cedar and Washington? We've had
Cedar and Washington was being repaired today by Cleveland Water. It's actually on the South Euclid side.
Yes.
But as soon as they get that repair complete, they'll fill it with stone, and South Euclid will be doing the patching and repairing of the road.
Any other questions for Mr. McCordy? Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCordy.
Welcome.
Next is our building commissioner, James McReynolds. Mr. McReynolds, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. On February 13th, the Board of Zoning Appeals met and considered 6 items. One was a request for a special permit to continue to rent out a 3rd floor unit, which was tabled, pending approval of a fire escape system for the 3rd floor. A special permit to operate a home business, a wig shop, was approved at 4499 Groveland. A special permit was approved for a fence forward of the rear foundation line at 14378 Washington Boulevard. A special permit to operate a religious organization in a 2-family district was approved for the congregation Zikron Chaim, if I pronounce that correctly. A special permit for a ramp in the garage rather than at the front of the house was approved for North Coast Homes at 2650 South Green Road. And a special permit was renewed for John Carroll University, allowing a rooftop antenna on the university's football field press box. On February 14th, the Architectural Review Board met. Signage for Rosita's Fashion Boutique was approved at 2243 Warrensville Center Road. A new garage was approved at 2500 Dysart Road. A new garage was approved at 3934 Tyndall Road. And changes to the elevations due to interior remodeling were approved at 4495 Churchill. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The policy of allowing permits for fences that go across the driveway, either from the back of the house, across from the back of the house, or across from the front of the house. When I was liaison, it seemed like all of the ones that had been back there by the back of the wall, by the back of the house, were being moved forward simply by request. And I'm wondering what the policy is for that. I think there's a good reason to have fences going across the driveway to the back of the house, so that we're not looking like a community of reclusive people. And also it lets a dog come up front to the front of the house, and that's a little bit more, I don't know, it's a little scarier for people walking down the street, I think. It's just not, I mean, if what's the policy?
Well, the policy is that the fences stay in the rear yard, with an exception that they may be moved to a side entry if there's no rear entry. But that would be the only exception.
That's just about every house in the city.
The only thing I would add to that is that during my tenure as law director, we've seen numerous requests for special permits to have fences forward of what's allowed by the code. So the BZA considers that particular issue with some frequency.
Yeah, exactly.
That issue is moving the fence forward.
Yeah, it's been a trend for years, and I don't think it's a good one. And I'm just wondering. So the idea is that oftentimes when they're allowed to move forward, it's because of a side door.
Yes, yeah. Usually it's because there's a side door present but not a rear door. There have been cases where because of the children present or because of the location of the house that they requested it. But these cases are heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals on a case-by-case basis.
So there's no guidelines?
Those are the guidelines, is that the fences are continued in the rear yard unless they're given special permission to come forward of the rear foundation.
Yeah. I mean, just about every house in the city has a side door.
And I think he's saying without a back door.
Yeah, I understand that, but it didn't seem to be a problem 15 years ago. I don't know how many years ago. When I just think if you walk down the street or you drive down the street and you see fences going across the driveway from the front of the house, I don't know what you would term that from a professional's point of view, but I would term that as being, not a friendly city, essentially. So, is there nothing we can do? Is there no ordinance or anything that we can do to make that?
There is one exception I know which would allow that. I'm sorry, excuse me, and that's on a corner lot where it may feel that the fence is forward of the foundation, but normally no, we wouldn't allow that.
I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. You're saying you don't like it when the fences are moved forward.
Correct.
So the legal standard that's codified is that the fence not be forward of the rear foundation line. So when someone comes in and asks for a fence to be located forward of the rear foundation line, they are denied a permit. And at that point, they have the option of appealing the denial of that permit to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And as Mr. McReynolds indicated, the BZA considers those on a case-by-case basis, and I've seen them both granted and denied, depending on what the circumstances are. But I think Mr. McReynolds is accurate in stating that where there's a side door, the BZA has been inclined to grant the special use permit and approve the fence.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Do we have any idea why? What's the relevance of the side door to the situation?
Well, I can tell you, I served on Board of Zoning Appeals for about 3 years, and I've probably seen, I don't know, 24 of these cases.
Okay.
And again, the ordinance says you can't go forward with the rear foundation line of the house. So there is an ordinance in place, but at times we did grant special use permits for instances where Mr. Reynolds said where there wasn't a back door, but there was a side door. Something as simple as that. But most of the time they were not approved. But again, it's a special use permit, so it's on a year-by-year renewal basis. So if the situation or the circumstances change, it comes back for renewal every single year, and it's up to the Board of Zoning on whether we renew that or not.
Yeah, in the last 3 years, I honestly, very few, if any, have been approved in the last couple of years. They're much older, usually those that are on the constant renewal basis.
That's good to know.
We have considered a few.
Yeah, there's been a few.
A few, very few, in the last few years.
I guess what I'm asking though, under what circumstances would the board grant a special use for a fence being added forward of the side door?
I think children
Just makes it
pets
easier.
are probably
You
the
don't have
ones
to
that
go-
I've seen,
Yeah.
but it's really very infrequent, at least the last few years.
That's good to know, because it didn't used to be that way. It was,
But I just would qualify that by saying there are literally dozens of special permits that are considered every year. I mean, there's a special permit for a fence forward of the rear foundation line that's renewed at every BZA meeting.
Yeah,
Every-
I'm saying new, I meant new ones.
But new ones,
Yeah.
correct, that's correct.
So I have a since we got on the topic of fences, Mayor.
yes.
My question is, do we have a standard about what the materials are? Because I've seen some fences that are very unattractive, and that's a greater concern to me.
Yeah,
That's what he's saying.
it's all part of the same package, it's just not appealing altogether. It's just,
I don't know if we do, whether we need to consider some. I was actually about to file my application for cross the driveway fence forward of my rear drive because I have neighbors that I lived next to for over 30 years, and I don't want to see them anymore. I have guest neighbors here tonight.
Oh, okay. I don't believe there is a materials standard in the code, and I think part of the reason for that is that the code is very old.
Right, and this has come up, and this is something that I do think we may want to look at. I can tell you that since during my time here, I have encountered a situation with neighbors where the material or quality of build of a fence had become an issue with respect to a fence that was built by one of our residents, and query what really there was in the ordinance to say that this particular fence violated our code, except to the extent that it may have been too tall or some other, I don't want to say minor, but I would say technical infractions that, while at the same time really did not speak at all to the aesthetics or the build quality of that particular fence. I think, you know,
In that case, Mayor, because of the material choice that the resident had selected, in that case it was referred to the Architectural Review Board, perhaps without a clear line to the Architectural Review Board, but they approved the material in that case.
I'm sorry, they what?
They approved the material that was used.
Oh, right, right.
And I found it to be questionable material, but there was nothing in our code to rely on at that time, and even now, that would prohibit construction grade material.
Very good. Well, maybe this is something, Mrs. Cameron.
I had a different question.
Oh, good, good. Well, before we do that, I'll just say that maybe the question of fences is something that we can take up further in committee.
Right.
But I appreciate it being brought up now. Mrs. Cameron, what's your point?
I just wanted to ask if there was any information that you could share with us concerning the Tullamore fire.
It's been referred to our prosecutor. I noticed that it's not on the docket for this week. Shaker Court has to assign a time for it. I'm going to meet with the prosecutor this Friday morning, and I will find out by that time what's going on.
Too bad.
I know, I would like to see him in court immediately. And, well, we're doing it according to law, and so I'm sure they're going to serve him and he will appear. It's just a matter of getting him scheduled.
No, but they do move.
Yeah, that's what
they do.
And I have been monitoring the house.
Yes.
The people who were working on it have seemingly abandoned it. So I haven't seen anybody working on it recently. That's trouble.
Yeah. And it's so regrettable. Such a nice, stately looking house until you get up on it.
We have declared it a nuisance, but we're hoping to find out what the owner's plans are. He hasn't come forward. Accepted responsibility.
All right.
Very good. Anything else for Mr. McReynolds? Mr. Weiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. First of all, in terms of the house in Tullamore, I hope we can find a way to sort of preserve it. In the meantime, it's obvious that whoever's there now isn't interested in taking care of it. So whatever you can do. I know you're on it, Mr. McReynolds. I really appreciate it.
We're actually working together with Patrick Brogan Myers on seeing if this would be an eligible candidate for the CIC to consider. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I would hate to see this home razed or destroyed. I think it's still salvageable, but it's distressing to have the roof open during this weather.
Right.
Because of the fact that we don't own the house, we can't really affect repairs.
Hopefully we can figure a way to accidentally throw a tarp on top of the house and cover the hole. My question concerns there's a house on Churchill that was before us that was interested in knocking down houses on Groveland to extend their house. They presented another plan to council. We tabled it because I didn't show up. Have they appeared before the BZA?
No, we're waiting for them to finalize their plans and go forward to BZA.
And
we had hoped that they would have been on the next schedule.
And they're going in front of BZA for what purpose?
To get a variance, well, for one, to tear down the house on Groveland so they have access to the rear of their property for the construction, and not to erect another house at within 6 months. So that would have been the reason for the variance. And there's a land coverage variance associated with that.
Okay, so they're proceeding with the plan as presented to us, but doing BZA probably before they come back. I know they haven't come to council for approval.
I have a feeling that there's some hesitation on the part of the owners now. There may be financial consideration that they're...
In terms of the whole project?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to sort of circle back around. I know we had they had come before planning and it was sent to council and then they didn't show up, so.
They seem very insistent on getting that project approved, and now we've heard nothing, so I think they're backing off, or Liz, it appears they're backing off.
Okay, but they still have to come to council to do what they.
Yes, yeah, actually, they'd have to go to BZA first and then go to council, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything further for Mr. McReynolds? Seeing none. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is our city engineer, Joe Juni. Mr. Juni.
No report this evening, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Juni. Next up is communications and civic engagement, Mike Cook. Mr. Cook, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. The New Heights Observer is out, and as discussed at previous meetings, I know Council received an email from Susan Drucker. The Best of the Heights Awards came out in this issue, and we heard from the editor, and this is by far the most votes they've ever heard from or received from the city of University Heights. So it looks, it's an indication that our campaign worked. Congratulations to Lock, Stock, and Brisket and Fish Sticks for taking the first and third prize in the Best New Restaurant category. Also, congratulations to our friends at the Heights Library for Best Place to Work. Here I voted for City Hall. But congratulations to the library. And also congratulations to these businesses for winning the Best University Heights Business Awards. Fairmount Cleaners, Bialys, and Lock, Stock, and Brisket. C Magazine and Fox State will be doing similar contests in the future, so we're already planning ahead for that. Next for my report, April 22nd is Earth Day. We're going to team up with our friends over at Heinen's to give out University Heights tote bags. So we'll do two things. One, reinforce the new branding, the new logo, and also encourage people on Earth Day to, instead of using the plastic bags, to use these bags, the shopping bags instead. We're still working on the exact time that we're going to be passing this out. Once I learn that, which will probably be as early as tomorrow, let everyone on council know if they want to participate in that. It'd be good outreach, meet some constituents, pass out some bags. And again, I should know the times on that, probably late afternoon, early evening on Monday, April 22nd. Third, just to get back to the magazine, for the last time I want to thank Mr. Siebert for his kind words. It's definitely a team effort, but on behalf of everyone on the team, thank you for your kind words on that. One nice thing to come out from the magazine is Susan talked to the owners there at Rosita's. You recall that there was a big article about Rosita's in the magazine, and definitely helped them get the word out about their business. They saw a good increase, and even though every business in University Heights is important, it's nice that the magazine was able to help out. You know, a business, you know, a family-run business, it's a kind of business that we need to have succeed in University Heights. It's a good fit for University Heights. And so that's kind of like the intention of the magazine, not just to inform residents, but to be supportive of, you know, things that are going on in the community, especially new business like Rosita. So we're very happy with that. And with that, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Cook?
No, but I would agree that our representation in the Mosaic was great. Well, I mean, it is, you know, it's a great publication, and it adds to the branding that we're going for in the city so that we can differentiate ourselves among our other communities.
Yes, thank you, and I agree. And it was particularly gratifying to go to the State of the Schools address last week and hear the school superintendent speak about the University Heights Mosaic, and within the context of what the school district is doing, and of just the overall raising of the profile of our city and the greater community. Again, you know, if I had asked somebody to make comments as great as Mr. Seifert's, I couldn't have gotten we couldn't have gotten better feedback than that. I mean, it is. Well, thank you. Yes, but I didn't ask you to. That's what I'm saying. But is that the? Oh, well, okay. But yes.
They might check cleared apparently.
Yeah, with the, but I couldn't be more pleased. The only thing that I wish was different about the magazine is that somewhere, Mike, your name should have been in it to say, you know, to a little self pat on the back, just job well done, and leading the team on that the way you did.
To be clear, there's my name's in there as a suggestion on who to contact if anyone has story ideas for the May issue or November issue. And also my dog's on the cover in one of the 460 pictures, because actually my dog, while she doesn't live in University Heights, she has a link to University Heights, which I'm going to waste your time explaining this.
I can't wait.
My kids are allergic to most dogs, so my dog, Margaret Dumont, is one of the fancy dogs that you don't get allergic to. She was raised by a breeder in Beechwood who is related to the owner of Jack's Deli. So that's Margaret's link, and that's her cover worthiness.
Mayor, I'll just echo some of the compliments that were given on the magazine. It's too bad that the Trash Tribune went away, but I never actually got to see a Trash Tribune in its entirety, because my dog would get to it before I would, or it would rain, or I'd find it in my bushes 6 months later. And I never, and I know the mayor had the same problem at his house, I never really got a hard copy. So I had to sign up for the newsletter online years ago, but this is much improvement. It's going through the mail, how revolutionary, right? And you were able to get in our the rest of our administration able to get advertisers to help cover the cost, and that's important. So this was a tremendous effort to cover the cost of the magazine.
Actually, Susan and I met with Cleveland Jewish News earlier this morning to talk about the May issue, and again, 41 ads, which is more. It's not a contest, but it's more than our neighbor magazines gets. Something that's just reflects this administration, this council, that local businesses are excited about what the city's doing and they want to be part of the publication. And a lot of them bought ads for all 3 issues, so I think they already have about 27 sold without even working yet on selling ones for the May issue. And again, I think a lot of people will repeat, a lot of people have seen it, will want to be part of it, and just seasonal ads with upcoming camps, not only in University Heights but surrounding communities, will probably buy ads. And there's a chance, if it's cost effective, we might even be able to go up from 32 pages, possibly do 8 more pages. Most of that's supported by ads, so there'll be a little bit more room for content.
I found it particularly gratifying to see not only so many of our local businesses supporting this effort and getting the word out on their own behalf, but seeing such things as the Cleveland Clinic and the Tri-City Jazz Fest all taking interest in our magazine here in our community. That was, I quietly hoped that we would have that kind of response, but to actually see it is it's quite gratifying.
And to be clear, it's a team effort, a lot of people involved in it, but just on behalf of all of those, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and something further, then thank you, Mr. Cook. Next, economic development, Susan Drucker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I believe it was 2 days after the last meeting, after Council so graciously approved the storefront improvement program, that I was already contacted by 2 property owners. So I've already had the this past week I had one meeting with a property owner and their architect, and they were given an application already to the program. And I did explain, though, I have to wait for the budget to finally pass, so I have money appropriated, but at least we can get the ball rolling for them. And then I have another meeting set next week with a different building owner who is interested in the program. So it did take off. Councilman Rock, I think you're the one that made a comment last meeting saying, hey, when people hear about these programs, they get excited, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm glad that's the interest we want to spark out there. So hopefully I'll be bringing you more news on that program in the future. I am working with 2 different business owners right now. Both want to bring 2 different types of restaurants to the city. Both have honed in on their locations that they'd like to choose. So now it's a matter of them working out with the property owners if they can get to some final agreement. But we can see 2 new restaurants possibly, and once those deals are solidified, then I can announce to you where those would be and what type of restaurant and what their names would be. I've been working with fire prevention and creating a policy for a pre-construction administrative review. It'll be a process we have for any new or expanding businesses when they're going to do construction. So we start meeting with building, fire prevention, and the businesses they'll start with me, and then we have a pre-construction meeting so that we can outline the process of what they have to go through to help walk them through the whether they have to go to planning, ARB, a council issue. So we're working on that policy. Patrick and I will be meeting with the Cedar Taylor Merchant Group this Wednesday evening. That's so that to coordinate any improvements. That's also in conjunction with Cleveland Heights. So any work that's done in that area on one side, we would like to complement it on our side as well. So that's why we stay in touch with this group to see what they have planned for this coming summer. And then Patrick and I continue to work on the zoning code. We are also consulting with other departments, specifically building department and fire prevention when it's appropriate at different parts of the code. So that's what we've been working on.
Okay, very good, very good. It sounds like your report does double duty for Patrick and the community development.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Drucker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Please keep up the good work. All right. We will move on now to council committees. First is building committee. Chairman Mark Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've asked the council clerk to schedule a meeting, hopefully the first couple weeks of April, a building committee meeting. I owe the community a chicken meeting. I told everybody we're going to review a year into the chicken program. So tell everybody, please collate all your stories you have about people being harassed, eaten, bitten, chased, and generally been mean to by chickens. We'll talk to them, see what they have to say. And sorry?
Pecked.
Hopefully we'll have something to say about the rental program as well. I know that that's sort of coming up for review. I think the administration want to deal with that before we get too much further in the spring. So if we have time, maybe that'll be the same meeting.
Have you heard anything from anyone about wanting to have another chicken keeping seminar? Because I know that's a requirement of the ordinance, and I would certainly want to schedule one if the interest is there.
I have not. I'll talk with Mr. McReynolds about if there have been any people seeking new permits. Is that a permit dependent item, or
yes,
do we have to have it?
Yes, it is something before your permit can be approved.
Okay. Well, if we haven't had any, I'll talk with Mr. McReynolds after the meeting.
Right, and I guess I'm also telegraphing to the community as a reminder that if you want to keep chickens, we do need to schedule a seminar for you to attend, and I'll be delighted to work that out with the Metro Parks if the interest is there. So whenever we have people who are ready to go, we will schedule that seminar accordingly and get you your training and certificate.
We have, I believe, in the city 2 active permits. So I don't imagine there will be a lot to discuss at the meeting, but that's sort of very good. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. Civic Information, Chairman Pamela Cameron. Mrs. Cameron.
Yes.
Speak to the microphone. Yes.
I'm sorry, our committee has been delayed. We've gotten beat out by budget hearings and meetings, but we still are keeping hope alive for a date to schedule our move to amend committee meeting.
Okay. Yes, and most recently I think the CIC beat you out on the date.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I was beat out again by a newcomer.
Well, we will find you. We will find a date.
Just need 30 minutes of everybody's precious time. 30 minutes.
That's good. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Finance, Susan Purdy.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, now that the budget time period is over, we'll start planning. So we'll start meetings probably in April or early May to start looking at that 5-year forecast that's been discussed and some of the other planning. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Governmental Affairs, Chairman Michelle Weiss, Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. I think March 12th, we have a combined service and government affairs meeting to discuss different ways to enhance revenue in our city and possibly a study on rubbish collection.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Earl.
No report, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Earl. Safety, Mr. Rupp.
Yes, Mayor, we have a meeting also on March 12th. This one is at 7 p.m. for your meeting, I think is following that. Do we have a location? Annex? Okay, so it'll be at the Annex agenda forthcoming.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Ruck. Service and Utilities, Mr. Sims.
No report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sims. Committee of the Whole, Vice Mayor Purdy.
Thank you, Mayor. There is a committee of the whole meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. April 1st, which is the first council meeting in April right here. We would like to meet the hour before the council meeting to discuss committee structure, and there's a suggestion from Mrs. Weiss to start to consider a retreat, follow up on the retreat that we had last year.
Yeah, we still have the materials from the first retreat, so we can. I've looked at them myself, but it would probably be good as a group to look at where we were and how far we've come and what still remains ahead from the previous priorities as well as the ones.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
6.
All right. It appears that we are at the end of our regular agenda. I'd like to thank all of you here in the community for coming out and seeing us this evening. It is always a pleasure to serve you and to serve the city. Our next regular meeting is 2 weeks from today, which is, of course, I hit calculator instead of calendar. So the 18th, yes, thank you. Whoever said the 18th, mosaic. Very good. So, without further ado, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Wiseman, second by Mrs. Cameron. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Aye.